Good evening, everyone, to all our participants here on Zoom and all our viewers on FB Live. Welcome to another exciting episode of TruTalks for Coaches, a live masterclass for coaches and people who want to become coaches and help people transform their lives and achieve their goals. I'm your host, Mamta Sharma, a coach myself and Director HR Support Foundation. At iCharts, we are relentlessly working towards mental, emotional, and behavioral growth of individuals and organizations, especially helping coaches and therapists build advanced coaching and therapeutic skills. To answer our questions and to show us the light at the end of the tunnel, we have with us Nitin Shah, founder and director, iCharts and iCharts Support Foundation. Welcome and good evening, Nitin.
Thank you, Mamta. How are you?
I'm good, and I hope everyone's as excited as I am to learn more about coaching competencies. But before we begin, I would like to do a quick recap, especially for people who are joining us for the first time, about what we have discussed in the previous episodes so far. We've spoken about what coaching is, how it helps people, what kind of coaching specializations are out there, how is coaching different from training and therapy and mentoring. And we also spoke about what are the various coaching models which can help you help other people, help your clients, and the standard models and the specialized models. And now, since the last episode, we are talking about the coaching competencies that a coach would ideally need in order to enable clients to transform and achieve goals and so on. And in the previous episode, last week, we also spoke about how it's important to follow professional standards, ethical guidelines, how to establish a coaching agreement, and why it's important to establish the coach-coachee relationship, how it should be client-centric, and so on. I hope I've covered everything, Nitin, that we have spoken about so far.
You have, Mamta. I think you've summarized it quite well. But before we begin today's episode, I want to check with you. Are there any questions from the previous episodes that you still have in your mind? Now that you've kind of covered 4 episodes, if there's anything specific that comes to your mind, please let me know so that we can also take that up before we go into communication skills.
Right. So I would also request people who are watching us on Facebook and on Zoom to share any questions, any queries that you have on whatever I just shared with you if you were not there, or if you were there, if you have any questions that are still there that you want answered. Please keep sharing them in the chat boxes wherever you are watching us, and we would love to take them up.
Also, just before we start, a couple of announcements that I would like to make. One is that we have the online batch of the Cognitive Hypnotic Coaching Program starting, the weekday batch from 29th. If any of you are interested in that, then you can check it out on the iCharts website, coaching.ichars.com. Also, everything that we are discussing is basically a part of that curriculum, that program. It's just that we are covering conceptual topics during the webinars and the lives, but obviously in the class, the focus is on more hands-on training. Second, for those of you who are not aware still, we have been running a Visitor Mental Challenge initiative for the last month or so. If any of you have not heard of it, my request, please check out the visitmhp.com website. It's an initiative that we are focusing on because we really think it's important for people to visit a mental health practitioner before it's too late. And you never know, you or someone that you know visiting a mental health practitioner sooner rather than later could actually save someone's life. So please check that initiative out, and if you could create content, if you could share to people requesting them to visit mental health practitioner before it's too late, it would be great. Perfect.
Oh,
So let's get started with today's no questions from the past.
yes, none so far, and we'll take them up as we go along with them the moment we receive them. Okay, so moving on to the next set of competencies, and we said that we'll talk about communication skills. And beginning with the basics, how do we actually define effective communication? While there are so many definitions and so many trainers telling us what it is, what do you think is effective communication, especially when it comes to coach-coachee relationship?
Okay. So let's first start by understanding what is communication, right? And that's like
Right,
a really basic, straightforward question.
right.
So Uh, Mantab, if you could define that for me, what is communication according to you?
Okay, so there are two people um, in an interaction. One person wants to communicate or send a message, so to say, to another person. He or she does that verbally or non-verbally, and the other person receives it and acts upon it.
Perfect, which means when an information travels from one person to another through
Right.
verbal or non-verbal means, or any means actually, then that becomes
Right.
communication.
Correct.
Right. Now, what would effective communication be? That when I want to send a message to you, if you
Mm-hmm.
understand the message exactly the way I want to send it to you,
Right.
then that becomes effective communication,
Yes, ideally that should be.
right? So, which means uh, as a coach, if I want you to understand how a coaching process can help you achieve
Right.
the outcomes that you want to achieve, right?
Mm-hmm.
And you're able to understand the effectiveness of coaching
Mm-hmm.
exactly as I would like you to understand it,
Right.
then that becomes effective communication.
Correct.
But if I communicate with you the importance of coaching in a way in which you are not able to understand its importance,
Hmm.
or that you feel that it will not help you, then
Right.
is that effective communication?
No, not at all.
Right. So basically, when we talk about effective communication, both in context of coaching and otherwise, it's
Mm-hmm.
important to understand that the communicator of the information, the person who wants to send the information, has a
Mm-hmm.
particular idea in their mind that they're trying to express, that they're trying to help the other person understand, right? And only when the other person understands the message exactly as they want it to be understood is
Hmm.
when it's called effective communication.
Correct.
Now, why is this important? The definition of effective communication.
Because many a times people, I mean, don't understand that it is important, because it is important for you to be understood by the other person. The onus of communicating in a way that the other person is able to understand is upon the sender or the speaker of that message, right? So I think it's important, and in this case, because we are talking about coachee, and the coach is going to help the coachee change or create meaningful change, the change that the coachee is looking at. So I think communication becomes really important. Otherwise there would be a gap, and the coachee would not be able to achieve what they're trying to achieve, and the coach would feel frustrated and so on.
Perfect. So have you ever noticed there are times when coaches would complain that
Hmm.
my client is just not willing to understand?
Right. Even in
If
therapy,
the
people say distant clients, they don't want to change, don't want to come up with all the facts and so on.
correct. So now whose responsibility is it to be able to explain it to the client effectively? The coaches or
The
the
coach,
client himself or herself?
obviously the coach, yes.
Right. So as long as the coachee is coming to the client,
Mm-hmm.
sorry, the coachee is coming to the coach and is
Hmm.
coming out of their free will,
Correct.
that willingness is there,
Yes, of course.
right? But if the coach is not able to explain to the coachee the importance of continuing with the session,
Right.
right, then it can't be blamed upon the coachee that the coachee is not willing.
Yeah.
And it's very important to understand this because this is the way a lot of times coaches are not coaches escape responsibility. They are not willing to work on their own skill sets,
Right.
right? And that becomes a bit of a challenge.
Mm-hmm. True.
Second, even in our day-to-day life, I think so. Recently, I was going through certain quotes, and someone had written a quote on their social media profile saying, "I am
Mm.
only responsible for what I say and not what you understand."
Right.
Right? If you don't care about whether people understand you correctly or not, then you may as well not try to communicate with anyone.
Absolutely.
So I understand the idea that there are certain people uh, who have
Had
who
written a quote on the social media.
who it doesn't matter whether they understand you or not.
Okay.
right? In the sense that that message is not meant for them, and their understanding, their lack of understanding really doesn't bother you, then it's a separate issue. Then you can say that this message was not meant for you. If you have misunderstood it, it's your problem. But if I want to talk to you, let's say, and the message is meant for you,
Right.
I give you an information, and
Right.
you're not able to understand it the way I want you to understand it.
Hmm.
And then I say, I had to say things to you, I said it to you. If you don't understand it correctly, that's your problem. Then why did I even say it to you? The message I had was in my head, right?
Right.
You have no way of reading my head. And thank God you can't read my head.
Yeah. Absolutely.
So, so that's actually important, because there are a lot of times we are not able to understand our responsibility
Hmm.
in the entire communication process.
Yes.
And as a coach, that responsibility is even greater.
Hmm.
Take the example where a coach works with a coachee and the coachee feels even more helpless at the end of the session.
Right.
Would you call it effective coaching or effective work or effective communication?
Not at all, of course.
Okay? So that's an important thing to keep in mind, that I am responsible both for what I say,
Hmm.
and if the message is meant for you, then I am also responsible for what you understand.
Correct. Right.
Right?
Mhm.
Uh, Perfect. So I hope that makes sense.
It does. It does. Really. And I think not only in coaching, even in our personal lives, a lot of times, and we often hear people saying, "Oh, when did I say this? I did not mean to say this. I didn't mean this," right? And I think
Correct.
this is where they're going wrong, right? And if the other person is not perceiving it the way or understanding it the way you wanted to them to understand, then you need to modify it and resend that message or that bit of communication, right?
Perfect. Which is the interesting bit, that in effective communication, observation
Hmm.
is an important element.
Right.
So see, when I start speaking to you, both as a coach or otherwise,
Mm-hmm.
I'm going to speak to you in a way in which I initially think it's the right way to communicate things to you,
Correct.
right? But you may have a different style of communication,
Right.
right? Now, there is a possibility where the way I'm speaking to you
Hmm.
doesn't really work for you. So, unless
Right.
I observe and
Hmm.
I notice your response, how
Hmm.
do I really know whether you're understanding the information correctly or not?
Right.
So this is our way of assessing where communication is effective or not. So there's an NLP presupposition called the meaning of your communication is the response that you get.
Right.
So if you want to understand whether the other person is able to understand you correctly or not,
Hmm.
whether you're communicating effectively or not,
Hmm.
then just observe what their response is. Their response tells you what you have communicated.
Right.
Right?
And
Now,
is it in the same context that feedback also becomes very important? The
so
feedback that the client is giving you.
So this is the feedback. When you're observing the client, you're observing the client both in terms of their expressions, their body language, and also in terms of how they respond to you, right?
Right.
Both verbal and non-verbal feedback.
Perfect.
Now, in context of coaching, this is important because anytime we are working with the client and the client is not able to understand the importance of something,
Hmm.
okay, then probably you have not been able to explain it to them. And this generally happens in terms of homework. Many a times, as a part of your coaching process, you want the client to do certain homework, right? And well, if the client doesn't understand that, then there's not much that you can do, and that responsibility is yours, so that you can help the client understand that.
Right. Perfect. Got that. Okay. Shaurya has a question. Shaurya, can we come back to this at the end of the episode? He's asking about the differences between EI and life coach. So I think we can take it up towards the end,
Yeah,
right?
yeah.
So Shaurya, stay with us. We'll come back to your question. So Nitin, it seems that there are various components when we talk about communication, because there's this message to send. Then there'll be a medium. So either I'm talking or using my hand gestures or body language or whatever, even silence, we say. and then there is the person receiving it, and then they're responding it. I'm observing it, and so on. So
Mamta, I'm losing your voice. Sorry. Can you say that again, the last part?
I said, can you hear me now?
I can hear you now.
Okay. I said it seems that there are various components in an effective communication.
Correct. So I think I've still lost Mamta right now. I hope I'm audible for all of you. Now, so yes, it's true that there are multiple components as far as effective communication is concerned. And as an individual, we need to be able to address all of those components. Right? Mamta, I'm losing your both video and audio. So I'm not sure what's happening. So while you get that sorted out, I'm just going to go ahead and talk about a couple of other things that I wanted to talk about in effective communication, which basically includes the subcomponents of uh, effective communication, which is effective listening and powerful questioning. Right? Now, Mamta, you're mute, huh, right now?
Yeah.
Yeah. Now, perfect. So when I talk about effective listening, what do we really mean by listening? Because obviously communication, listening becomes a part of communication, right? So what do we mean by effective listening?
So effective listening should be when I'm completely tuned into so what's being said or expressed. I'm listening to it without bias or judgment, and I'm not distracted, and so on.
Perfect. So for us, primarily from a coaching point of view,
Right.
Effective listening means listening to what is being said to us first, rather than trying to read between lines.
Correct.
Right? That's the first step. Now, why is it important? Because many a times when we are trying to analyze people, we end up reading between lines information which may not be relevant.
Correct.
Let me give you an example. Let me ask you a question. So, Mamta, here's a story. I want you to hear the story and then I'm going to ask you the question at the end.
Okay.
So, Amit fired his chartered accountant,
Right.
Sumit,
Uh-huh.
hired Ajit in place of Sumit the next day as a chartered accountant.
Okay.
Uh, it was noticed by Amit that the next day 1,000 rupees were missing from the cash register.
Okay.
Now, is the idea clear? The story clear?
Yeah.
So Amit fired Sumit, who was a CA, hired Ajit in place of Sumit. Next day, noticed that 1,000 rupees were missing from the cash
Cash.
register.
Yeah.
What happened?
What happened?
Correct. So my question is, what happened?
Exactly what you said. So Amit fires his CA Sumit, and hires another person in his place, Ajit. And the next day, you said he noticed that 1,000 bucks are missing from their cash registers of the company or the shop or whatever.
Perfect. Now, if you had to give me a reason, why was the 1,000 rupees missing? What possible reasons would you give me?
So, okay, this is interesting. So, Sumit, okay, so there are various possibilities. Sumit had already stolen that money,
So if
and
you were to, rather than giving me the various possibilities, if you were to tell me the first thing that comes to your mind.
the first thing is Sumit gets annoyed on being fired and takes whatever was in the cash register and elopes. I mean, goes away.
Perfect. And now what are the other possibilities?
Other possibilities are that uh, anyone else took it in the company, has not yet informed Amit. Anybody else took it in the company and is a thief. and Amit has not been able to identify that person.
Hmm.
Um, mm, Sumit had already stolen it when he was fired.
Hmm.
So the theft happens first and the firing happens later. Amit discovers it the next day. That's all. The new recruit is a thief. So he's stolen it. Okay. Okay. Amit himself took the money but can't recall.
Perfect. So there are so many possibilities, right?
Yeah.
Now, if I were to hear what you said and
Hmm.
just what you said
Hmm.
and not analyze and interpret
Yeah.
in order to find what happened to the 1,000 rupees, wouldn't I ask you questions?
Yes.
Right. And those questions will give me greater clarity as to what really happened.
Right.
But if I were to try and read between the lines,
Mm-hmm.
because the client is constantly talking to me, I don't have as much time as I gave you to identify what could be the different possibilities.
Correct.
Right. So I asked the question, the client gives me this summary that 1,000 rupees was stolen. Now the client is beginning to talk more about what else happened. And in my head, I need to analyze what happened to the 1,000 rupees. The
Correct.
chances are I'll go with my first instinct, which was Sumit took the 1,000 rupees.
Right.
Now, whether I like it or not, my entire line of questioning will try to bring the client to that understanding, which may
That
not be the actual understanding.
formed in my head. Yeah.
Correct, because their opinion is already formed in my head. And my
Right.
questions are eventually driven by their opinion.
Right.
Right. So, one of the things that we keep telling people as far as coaching is concerned, and even therapy, that when you're working with clients, it's not about how much you analyze them. It's about can you hear what they are saying without, and as you said, without bias, without judgment, and without a need to analyze and understand things that the client has not told you.
Correct.
So, effective listening
Hmm.
eventually will lead to powerful questioning.
Right.
You can only ask powerful questions if you've heard what the client has said and you have identified what the client has not said, so that you can ask the questions to explore it.
Correct. Correct.
Right. And powerful questioning can only happen if effective listening has happened. So the two of them actually go hand in hand.
Correct.
I
Right.
hope that kind of makes sense.
Yes. Yes. And Nitin, I don't know. I'm again, maybe I'm reading between the lines. It probably happens because a lot of people, at least when they begin working with clients, come from an understanding that it's their responsibility to understand the client's life and resolve their problems and hand them solutions because they are the experts.
So it's actually true. So one of the things that happens with coaching is that many times coaches feel exactly what you've said now. And I've
Right.
had a conversation with a lot of coaches, budding coaches, people who have been coaches and coaching for years. And one of the things that they tell me, and ideally that should not happen, especially for those who have been trained in coaching, because coaching predominantly is based on this idea that you're
Right.
not supposed to advise a client. You're
Mm-hmm.
not supposed to give solution to a client. You're
Right.
supposed to help the client come to their solutions.
Hmm.
Right. And again, that will happen with effective listening and powerful questioning. But it's true that a lot of coaches think it's their responsibility to tell the client what needs to be done.
Right.
Right. Many a times it also comes from a fact that it makes the coach feel they are in control of the process.
Mm-hmm.
Right. And that need to control kind of can lead to a lot of other things as far as coaching is concerned. But yes, as I said, the point is that as a coach, it's
Right.
important for us to understand our role is only to help the client explore what's in their mind and
Correct.
decide what's best for them.
Right.
Okay? And as long as you keep this in mind,
Mm-hmm.
I think both effective listening and powerful questioning happens. Obviously, you need to know the right questions
Right.
and the indicators of when to ask those questions that we'll discuss as you're going ahead. But apart from that, that's the key thing to keep in mind. And last, I personally believe, and I personally work on this principle, I can never know more about the client than the client knows.
Right.
which means there's really no way that I can help the client, guide the client, suggest the client, advise the client, because I don't know the complete picture. And no matter how good and great I am, it's highly unlikely that I will understand everything about the client or the coachee from their point of view. I can understand, I can try to understand doing that, right?
Right.
But to know everything is, yeah, the coachee many times doesn't know everything about themselves. So for me to know everything about them is stretching it too far.
Nitin, I think this realization itself, I mean, especially personally for me, when working with clients, is huge because it it immediately makes it easier for you to be empathetic, non-judgmental, client-centric. Like it takes care of so many issues in one go.
It does. Also, see what happens is when you're trying, what I'm going to say is going to be slightly controversial.
Okay.
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 When I say controversial, because mostly in coaching and therapy, the idea is that therapist needs or coach needs to understand the client, needs to have needs to be able to at times feel what the coachee or the client is going through. Okay.
Right.
Uh, See, the problem with that approach is that when I try to understand what's happening with the client,
Right.
okay, no matter what I do, I don't know everything about the client. That's
Oh,
practically impossible,
right.
right? Now there would be bits and pieces of the client's behavior or the coach's behavior that I will not be able to understand,
Correct.
and that creates frustration for me and for coachee both,
Right.
right? But the moment I understand this, that
Hmm.
all right, I may not be able to understand the coachee completely,
Hmm.
but I understand that whatever the coachee is going through
Hmm.
is making complete sense as per the model of the coachee,
Right.
right? And rather than trying to understand what coachee has not said,
Hmm.
I just need to be able to listen to the coachee,
Hmm.
need to be able to ask the right questions so that the coachee can give me as much information as humanly possible, so that I can get a more closer understanding of what's happening with them, right? I'm still not living under an illusion that I will know everything about the coach and I'll understand the coachee completely.
Right.
Okay? Uh, Most importantly, whether I understand the coachee or not, the
Hmm.
coachee understands himself or herself, his or her position better than anyone else.
Right.
So the final outcome still
Hmm.
has to come from the coachee. As long as I can keep these two things in mind, the rest is fine. Obviously, there is a role that I am playing. I'm still asking the questions so that the coachee can explore their own maps, their own minds, their own life in a more objective manner,
Correct.
right? So I wouldn't say that I am not relevant in the process at all. Okay?
Mm-hmm.
But my relevance is more towards helping the client understand themselves better rather than me trying to create an understanding for them.
Absolutely. Perfect. Perfect. That makes sense. Right. So, Nitin, how do we develop this engaged listening or effective listening skill? What do we do?
So, couple of things as a habit,
Hmm.
start observing and listening to the words that people are saying. Don't try and interpret and analyze what they're trying to tell you. And I know this is generally contrary to what a lot of people would tell you, that when you're looking at people, observe their body language, observe their expression, try to see what they mean when they are saying something. And I'm
Hmm.
not saying that's wrong. I'm saying there's a time and a place to do it, right? Do it after you have learned to observe what the words are. I understand the importance of body language and tone, but to give it more importance and
Mm-hmm.
to say it overrules what the client is saying verbally, when the client is coming to you out of their free will, it's
Hmm.
stretching it too far. And I understand the Mehrabian theory and the 93-7% rule,
Mm-hmm.
the 55-38-7% rule, but please go back and check what Mehrabian himself has said about that research.
Right.
That's a research which is based on a one word conversation.
Correct.
Okay. When a client speaks to you and gives you more elaborate detail, the context changes immensely.
Right.
So a lot of times the way the research is being quoted is out of context.
Mm.
Okay.
Right.
Words play a very important role when clients are speaking, I understand there are places where clients will come, sit, they will not talk more. They would be very selective in the words that they're using, right? Uh, because there are a lot of long pauses,
Mm-hmm.
then that pause and what the client is doing in between that pause
Mm-hmm.
can become very important indicators of what's happening with them.
Right.
But when the client is verbally speaking to you,
Mm-hmm.
for you to not focus on that because you want to focus on other things, okay, is important data in front of you being missed.
Mm.
Uh,
Correct.
let, let me give you a more day-to-day example. Uh, how many times we say that we don't understand our partners well? जब मुझे तो समझ में नहीं आता why my partners behave the way they behave,
I think all the time.
right? In the next 1 week, just listen to every word that your partner says. Forget the tone, forget the body language, forget everything else. Just in the next 1 week, experiment with this. Every time your partner complains about something, just listen to the specific word that your partner speaks. At the end of the week, you'll be surprised how much your partner has been telling you that you have not been paying attention to.
Right.
So, in the abstract, we at times miss the obvious,
Mm-hmm.
right? Catch the obvious first
Mm.
and then go behind the abstract and not the other way around,
Right.
right?
Right.
So, that will be the first thing that I will tell you to develop engaging listening skills, to pay attention to what people around you are saying. And you don't need a client for that. Just do it with your family members. In the next 1 week, just observe what they're saying.
Okay.
Observe just what you're speaking to yourself, because you're also having a conversation with yourself in your head,
Right.
right? Not what that conversation means, not why are you having that conversation,
Mm.
just the specific content of the thought that you have,
Okay. Okay.
right? And
Right.
you will notice that your ability to listen to things clearly improves drastically. You can also practice certain mindfulness processes,
Mm-hmm.
okay? Because mindfulness is again a habit. So what happens is you start by observing what's outside you, but
Mm.
slowly and gradually the mind learns to also internalize it and start observing what's happening inside you,
Correct.
right?
Right.
I think I don't know if you've discussed this in the coaching wala series or not, but we have discussed this in other episodes where I generally tell people that when you wake up in the morning, just start by observing 3 breaths. In the afternoon, before you're having lunch, observe your breath for 3 times. Before you go off to sleep, observe your breath for 3 times. Make it
Correct.
a habit. And then start paying attention to what you are thinking while you are observing those 3 breaths. And just do it for three breaths each every day for the next 1 week. And then see that starts kind of having an escalating effect where other areas of your life you start becoming more mindful.
Right. Perfect. Perfect. And Nitin, because we are talking about observing, what do you have to say about all this literature that's out there on body language? There are like books and speakers talking about it. And we've been told that, when you're being interviewed, the panel is observing you and so on. What about that?
So, two parts of the story. There is
Yeah,
one, your body language, and you analyzing other people's body language.
correct.
Okay. So one of the things is while there are books on body language, there is no standard book on body language. What I mean by this is, culturally speaking, different people operate differently. The body language context changes completely when it comes to cultures,
Right.
right? So while now people have started creating more culture specific body language books,
Mm-hmm.
yet it can't be really personalized to individuals. And to give you an example, so uh, you know how it said that when you don't look into people's eyes, that's a sign that you lack confidence.
Yeah, very common.
When I was in my college, I uh, I'm someone who has had a habit of observing people keenly for a long time. That was true even in my college. Probably
Okay.
it's greater now, but it was there to some extent even in the college.
Right.
Um, we used to go into the canteen, and there
Yeah.
was this girl who would sit alone.
Okay.
Okay? Everything about her body language
Mm-hmm.
told me that she lacks the confidence
Mm-hmm.
to speak to people. Her
Mm-hmm.
social skills are really poor, and
Mm-hmm.
that's the reason why she's all alone.
Okay.
Okay. I observed her for few days.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. One day, I went to the canteen. She was already sitting in the canteen. My friends were not there. So I decided to go and have a conversation with her.
Okay.
Okay. When I started speaking to her,
Mm-hmm.
she still was, she did not look into my eyes. She did not. Malab, it did not come across as someone who would be, for the lack of any other word, forcefully out there.
Okay.
Okay. Her shoulders were still thoda slouched and so on. But when she had a conversation with me, I was blown away.
Okay.
Okay. The conviction with which she spoke.
Yeah.
So, except for her tone and her words, everything else in her body language told me that she probably lacks confidence completely. Okay. But her tone and her words,
Right.
and the fact that when I would present a contrary point of view, she would not back down. She would still put forth her point.
Right.
Right? Not in the sense that she was arguing with me, but like what a discussion should be.
Correct.
And for me, this was like shock. That was one of the first times when I understood that probably, while it's not to say that body language is not important, it's very important, but interpretations of it can go wrong many a times.
Perfect.
Right? Now, the reason I said that there's a difference between you interpreting someone else and then you being a part of a process where you're being interpreted is different, because sadly, a lot of interviewers have read those body language books.
Right.
So whether your body represents that or not, they are going to interpret you based on that.
Yeah.
So it still makes sense that you read about those books and you ensure that your body language represents what they are looking for, because that's what they are looking for. And again, remember, effective communication, you need to be able to convey what you want to convey to them exactly in a way in which they understand what you want them to understand. So if they are going to misread your body language, you as well modify your body language in a way in which their misreading works for you.
Perfect. Makes sense. Makes sense. Right. That's important. Perfect. Okay, so before I ask any other questions, I would like to request our viewers, if you have any questions, any observations, any thoughts, please feel free to share them, because that also helps us understand the kind of information and that you're looking for. Perfect. So Nitin, we also spoke about questioning, which is the other half
So
of.
Mamta, just before that, there is a question on Facebook.
Yeah, please.
Which is why more problem at the time of homework. So I think when I was speaking about homework and how at times when coaches communicate, the clients have a problem with respect to the homework. So this is a question by Mani. So Mani Mistriji, the thing is that in most of the places, coaches are not really supposed to tell the client what needs to be done. And so to that extent, if you're following the coaching guidelines effectively, you're simply asking questions and you're listening to the client. And if your questions are not giving you the results or the answer that you're looking for, you will tweak the questions. So that's a part of your skill set. So there's really not much of a problem there. In terms of a homework, is a place where you actually have to tell the client that this is the homework that I want you to do in the coming week. Right? And many a times clients come back the next week saying that I did not do the homework, I did not feel like doing it. What they're basically saying is I did not think it's important enough.
Right.
And that's the reason why this becomes like more important from the point of view of homework. Also, your next session that you're going to do with the coachee may depend upon the results they've got from the homework.
Absolutely.
So if they've not completed the homework, that kind of puts your next session in kind of a bit of a challenge.
Right. Perfect. Perfect. That makes sense. So coming to questioning, Nitin, when you said asking the right questions so that you can elicit the information that is missing from whatever the client has told you. So how is questioning different from, and how do I ensure that it does not come across as confrontation or probing to the client?
Okay, so Mamta, I wouldn't talk about probing because the word probing means different things to different people. So let's look at it in terms of confrontation or exploration.
Okay.
Right?
Makes sense.
So you can ask questions to people for one of two reasons. You're asking a question because you want to confront the person, or you want to explore what the person means. Right? Now, an example of a confrontation is when you tell me that Nitin, this happened, or you say that my partner rejected me, right? And I confront you and I say, no, how do you know that your partner rejected you? Maybe you're wrong. Maybe they did not mean to reject you, right? Now I'm literally confronting you. and the confrontation is happening on the basis that what you're saying may be factually incorrect, right? I would refrain from doing it. I know there are certain therapeutic modalities. I also know certain coaches who become very confrontational with that when they're working with their clients. But I personally would avoid this simply because coaches or clients at times uh, become defensive. And the moment the coachee becomes defensive, they are more interested in defending themselves rather than in explaining to you what's happening in their life. And you also reach a place where you want to prove to the coachee that you are right and they're wrong, which doesn't really augur well for both of you, right? Alternatively, when we talk about exploration, right, exploration is more about, so let's say the client says my partner rejected me, right? And I ask the client, all right, would you be able to tell me exactly what happened that made you feel that your partner rejected you? Now what I'm saying is, I'm not saying you're wrong.
Yep.
At the same time, I'm also saying this is how you felt, right? And I'm also asking you to tell me factually what happened, right? So to understand exploration better, it's actually good to use to understand uh, the three terminologies that I'm going to talk about: generalization, deletion, distortion.
Right.
What do I mean by this? So there are places that you will notice people have a tendency to talk in generalization. They will use words like always, no one, everyone,
Yep.
right? So this is a generalization.
Yep.
Then there are places where people have a tendency to delete information. Now, when I say delete, what I really mean is they will give you incomplete information.
Okay.
An example is my partner was angry. Okay, but they've not told you angry about what.
Angry at whom?
Angry at whom? When were they angry? How long were they angry for? Right? What exactly did they say when they were angry? What exactly did they do when they were angry? So the information that my partner got angry is an incomplete information. I'm not saying it's factually wrong. That they may be true, they may be correct in their understanding that my partner was angry, right? But from a coach point of view, this information is still incomplete.
Right.
To give you a more positive example, many times coaches will come and tell you that I want to become confident, right?
Yeah.
But they've not told you confident at what,
Yeah.
right? Uh, what is the exact thing they would like to do with that confidence?
Exactly.
Because technically, if a coachee says I'm not confident of jumping from my building without a parachute and I live on a 30th floor, I guess it's a good lack of confidence.
Yeah.
Right? So it's important to contextualize what that confidence is about.
Absolutely.
So if the coachee is talking to you in a way in which they're giving you incomplete information, then that's deletion. Right? And then there's distortion. In distortion, coaches will use interpretations. So like my partner rejected me. Rejection doesn't really tell you what happened. It's an interpretation. Uh, to explain this to you, okay. I want you to close your eyes for a moment.
Okay.
And everyone who's there with us, either on the Zoom or on Facebook, if you could just close your eyes for a moment.
Yeah.
Okay. And I want you to imagine this.
Okay.
Uh, Salman Khan slapped Shah Rukh Khan.
Right.
And see what image comes to your mind.
Salman Khan slapping Shah Rukh.
Okay. Now let's have another imagination.
Okay.
Shah Rukh Khan rejected Salman Khan.
Okay.
Okay. Between the two, which was more clearer for you to imagine?
Slapping, of course.
Because you can open your eyes. Because with slapping, you know that someone's hand touched someone's cheek, right?
Force.
And with force,
No.
right? So that's clear.
Yeah.
This is observable. There is
Right.
no interpretation in that.
Right.
But when I say Shah Rukh Khan rejected Salman Khan, rejection could be in so many ways.
Yes.
Right? Salman Khan entered a party, Shah Rukh Khan did not look at him. Right? Shah Rukh Khan chose not to do a movie with Salman Khan.
Right.
Okay? Shah Rukh Khan did not go for a dinner or a lunch party with Salman Khan.
Right.
So there can be so many ways in which rejection can happen.
Yes, absolutely.
Right? And the problem with the word rejection is because rejection is not telling me what happened.
Yeah.
There's a possibility that there was no rejection.
Right.
That rejection was simply an interpretation. So Salman Khan, so Shah Rukh Khan not looking at Salman Khan when Salman Khan enters a party could mean rejection, could also mean Shah Rukh Khan was busy signing autographs with his fans.
Correct.
Right? Now, whether this is rejection or not is an interpretation.
Right.
Right? Now, again, when I say that Shah Rukh Khan rejected Salman Khan, technically, I don't know whether he rejected or not. So it's not necessary that this is factually incorrect. It's just an interpretation, which may be a correct interpretation and may also be an incorrect interpretation. Now, as a coach, can I go along with this interpretation blindly?
No.
So what do I need to do?
So ask them.
Perfect. I ask questions. So the moment my partner says, my client says, my partner rejected me, my question would be to explore exactly what happened that was interpreted as rejection. And I may then ask the coachee, all right, what exactly did your partner do or not do that was interpreted by you as rejection?
Right.
Now, when my coachee says, oh, I went into the room and my partner did not look at me, I know this is the sequence of events. Right? And now I can explore further. Are there other ways of interpreting it?
Correct.
Right? So it gives me more options and it gives the coachee or the client the ability to explore the same situations from multiple point of views.
Right. Absolutely.
Right? So that's the difference between exploration and confrontation. In exploration, you are exploring the deletion, not by telling the client that you're wrong, but by actually asking them, all right, tell me the missing information. In distortion, you're asking the clients to give you the actual factual piece of information so that they can then look at it in terms of whether their interpretation is correct or incorrect. And there's a high possibility that their interpretation may be correct. So as a coach, I'm not working on a presupposition that what my client says is wrong. I'm working on a presupposition that my client is saying what they're saying based on interpreting a set of information that they have in their mind. I want them to first understand what that factual piece of information is and then see if there are other ways of interpreting it. And I would again ask the client questions to be able to interpret it in that way, in their own ways.
Perfect.
I hope this makes sense because this can be a bit tricky to understand at times.
Right.
So for all of you who are both on either Facebook or here, can please comment and let us know if this makes sense for all of you. What I meant by effective questioning and also by engaged listening.
So Nitin, I have a lot of questions and comments.
Okay.
Akash is saying some people speak normal words, but their body language or tone is very irritating. How to interpret this?
Okay. So when you say that their body language and tone is very irritating, okay, who is getting irritated? The person who's listening to it, right?
Right.
Okay. So that's the person's issue. That's not about the person who's saying it, because I've had situations where there are two people who are having a conversation with the same person simultaneously, and one person comes and tells me his tone was so irritating, and the other person says, well, I did not notice any irritation in that tone.
Correct.
Right? So at times our mind also has a tendency to distort information, and that's the reason I'm saying that when you talk about tone and when you talk about body language, there is a possibility that there is a bit of a deletion distortion happening even in terms of your mental makeup. Your mind can only see as many things at a given point of time.
Correct.
Right? So be careful about interpreting it. Now, if you're not sure, Ask the person. You can always ask a question.
Absolutely.
Right? And especially in relationships that matter to you. Okay? Ask that question. Don't go along with interpretations and assumptions.
Perfect. Makes sense. Okay, Habiba is saying it makes sense that we shouldn't be judging the clients on their body language, but should we not give importance to our own body language and not to offend the clients?
And therefore, I said, when it comes to your body language, that you have to be careful about, because you have to present yourself in a way in which the client will get the message you want to give them.
Right.
Right? But don't interpret the client's body language. So on your part, you have to take care of it. So to give you an example, why just body language? Let's say the setup in which you're doing a coaching session. Right? You're working with someone who you want to come across as extremely professional.
Correct.
Right? Probably it makes sense to be dressed in a particular way so that you come across as professional. Right? Not because your dressing defines how professional you are, but it may define how the other person interprets that.
Correct.
Right? So what I'm doing is I'm separating two things. I'm telling you, on your part, don't try and interpret a client based on their body language or their dress and so on, because there could be X thousand things which have resulted in that body language or have resulted in that dressing that you are not aware of. So there, rather than interpreting, ask questions. But at the same time, when you are going somewhere, you have to be careful about what you are presenting, because you don't know whether the other person will give you the benefit of doubt and will ask you the questions or not.
Perfect.
Right? So as a coach, you still have to be very careful about how you are dressed and how you're presenting yourself.
Correct. Correct. Makes sense. Zenat is asking how to interpret the words when actions are refusing their words. So I'm assuming she's saying they are contradictory. I hope, Zenat, I'm right.
I would probably, so the way I would work, if so, it depends on whether it's in coaching context or in its relationship, right?
Yeah.
In our day-to-day life. In coaching context, I'll just bring it to the awareness of the client that this is what you're saying and this is what you're doing.
Right.
Right? I need to understand how the two of them are in sync with each other.
Right.
Okay? Now let the client describe.
Perfect.
Right? In relationships, it's a bit tricky. The reason it's a bit tricky is because at times you can't be so, you can't keep questioning everything in your relationship. Ideally, you should be able to, but sadly, your partner still may get irritated. Right? So the way I work in my relationship is this: in the moment where the person's tone and body language is not matching each other, especially if the person is not in a calm mental state, I would probably not bring it up. I would make a note of it, keep it at the back of my head. Next time when I'm having a conversation with my partner, when I know that my partner is comfortable, is happier, is more in an is an interaction mode rather than in a confrontation mode, then I'll bring this in to their awareness that, you know, last time when we were doing this, when we were having a conversation, this is what you were saying, but this is what I noticed in your body language. Okay? Maybe I missed something, so I want to understand from you what was happening. Perfect. And that generally works. At least in my case, I've noticed in most cases it works.
Okay. Perfect. I hope that answers your question, Zina. Okay, Suman Lata on Facebook is asking how to communicate with thinking, not expressive coachee. Okay, a coachee who's thinking, not expressive, without asking the coach should understand, especially female coach, emotional lady, how should we handle?
Okay, I'm not sure about the question. Let me just read this again. How to communicate with thinking, not expressive coachee. Without asking coachee shouldn't understand. Okay, so Sumanita, just correct me if I'm wrong. My understanding is you're saying that you have a coachee, let's say, who's not expressive at all. And because they're not expressive, even while you're asking questions, those questions are not helping you get the answer that you're looking for. Then shouldn't a coach be able to understand this? Okay. The answer is no. You should have the questions and the tools to be able to help the coachee answer those questions for you. The coachee may not answer it in too many words, but you still don't need to interpret it. You can still ask them more questions. For example, one of the things that we use, there's a process called abstract metaphor, where, and this is especially used with coaches who are not willing to express too much. You know, they're too, either they don't trust you enough to begin with, and therefore they're not able to say so much, or they have not been able to form what they want to say clearly in their head, and therefore they're not able to communicate things to you clearly. So
Right.
what we do is we draw something very abstract, and then we would ask the coachee to be able to identify certain items, certain shapes in it, and then to be able to create a story out of it. What we are doing is we are doing a projective technique, right? Where, because the coachee is already thinking about it, they may not be able to express it, but they have it in their head. It's a part of their mental makeup, what they are there for you, or what they are there in front of you for, right? So in that case, they perceive that drawing and interpret that drawing based on what's happening in their head.
Right.
And then they create a story which is again in sync with what's happening in their life. I just have to ask them eventually, how does this story relate to what's happening in your life?
Right.
And then they're able to give me the answer. And we have worked with, like, I've at least used this with not less than 60-70 clients till now, and I'm more than sure about it. And in not even a single case, eventually the coachee was not able to give me an answer. They were all able to give me an answer as a part of the process. So that's your skill set. Do you have the toolkit to be able to work with the coachee?
Right.
Right? And that toolkit should not really depend on your need to interpret.
Absolutely. Makes sense. I think, Sonalata, let us know if that makes sense or if that answers your question.
And also if I've understood your question correctly, because
Yes.
I have assumed the meaning behind the question right now, but that's because I'm not sure if you're still there with us on the
Right.
line.
Nitin, there's a question on Facebook by Suraj. I am not sure how this is relevant to our current discussion, and the comments are really long. Can you like take a quick glance and
Okay. So the real science of universe is law of karma, and those who understand the patterns are enlightened ones. Buddha knew about this 545 lifetime. Still, he did not consider himself enlightened, and we do not know one of our past life, and we think we understand science. I'm not sure what is the context with respect to what we are discussing about the first comment. Uh, Enlightenment, non-enlightenment, these are very big words, very heavy words. I'm too small to comment on that or answer on that. I have never come across a person who I can have a conversation with and think that they are completely enlightened. uh, Maybe I've not met the right set of person. Buddha never spoke to me, I never spoke to Buddha, so can't comment on Buddha, sorry. That's all that I can say actually.
right? And I would rather say, Suraj, if you have a specific question, then it would be helpful. I mean, like, then we can probably address it more properly because these are comments and I don't understand. So I'm sorry, the relevance.
Again, and then Suraj has spoken about law of karma in terms of it's not good to do karma to do business with education, food, and women, as education to food will harm your karma. See, it all, so these are all too abstract things to talk about. We can have a discussion offline about this. I can like really give you a complete flip on what karma is and how karma works and so on. But all of these are interpretations that each of us have. Technically, from a coaching point of view, none of this matters. What really matters is this: a coachee comes and tells me that, Nitin, this is the end objective that I want to achieve.
Right.
I'm not able to achieve that.
Right.
As a coach, do I have the competencies to listen to them and to ask the right questions so that they can understand what is stopping them from moving towards their objective outcome? And do I have the techniques and the skill sets to help them overcome whatever hindrances are stopping them from achieving their outcome? As long as by the time we reach the end of the sessions, as in the complete coaching process, the coachee is able to achieve the desired outcome. Okay,
Right.
my work is done. Now karma, non-karma, spirituality, non-spirituality, Buddha, non-Buddha is a discussion that I can have with myself, right? It's not a discussion that's meant for my coachee or my client.
Perfect. Perfect. I think I agree on that. Okay. Nitin, coming back to questioning, while you have, explained through the deletion, distortion, generalization model, how we can, access or help the client express what's missing.
Mamta, just a second before you come to that. Actually, Suraj has one comment which I think is very relevant. When
Okay.
you've spoken about that, there are times when people have. So I'm not reading the entire comment. I'm just giving you the gist of it.
Okay.
Where he has mentioned about people before meeting the person and after meeting the person still continue to have a problem.
Mm-hmm.
Right now, if that's the case, then it's the failure of the coach to be able to help the coachee, as long as the coachee came to the coach out of their free will.
Right.
Right, then I completely agree with I again, sorry, I don't know what you really mean, but your comments are long and I am not sure how they are completely relevant to what we are talking. So my understanding of it, and please correct me if I'm wrong in the comments, is that coaches at times are not able to help the client and therefore the coaching process has failed. If that's the question answer, then I would say that that's true, that probably the coach was not able to work with the coachee as effectively as they should have, and probably the coach needs to work towards developing their skills more effectively. Right, so I for once would really say that the effectiveness of a coaching session is defined by whether you're able to help the coachee achieve the desired outcome or not.
Perfect. I think that's fair enough. Right.
Sorry, now
So,
you're asking some question which where I
yeah.
interrupted you in
So
between.
I was asking that while you've explained, deletion, distortion, and generalization, and how we can use this model to elicit any missing information or objective information, are there standard or structured questioning models, or are there any that you recommend? Like, how is there a system to this?
So there are like two kinds of models. There are structured models and there are frameworks.
Right.
Okay, so in coaching, one of the frameworks that's used extensively is appreciative inquiry,
Right.
where basically the idea is to explore and inquire from the coachee
Hmm.
uh, the various possibilities. And
Hmm.
again, it goes on an inquiry basis, which means that you're exploring it. You're not really confronting the client.
Okay.
And the basic assumption is that everything is possible.
Hmm.
You just need to be able to explore it and find a way to be able to work towards it.
Okay.
Right, so that's one model. That's a model that lot of people use, but more than a model I would call it a framework, because it doesn't really revolve around specific instructions of what questions to ask where. There are like 5 steps to it and then you revolve around those 5 steps. It's again similar in a way to what we spoke about in terms of grow, regrow, t-grow, soft c, and so on.
More like a general guideline, right?
It's more like a general guideline. Then
Okay.
there are specific questioning models. For
Mm-hmm.
example, in NLP there's a model called meta model.
Yeah.
Okay, which literally works on this principle. So there are like classifications which are made where if a client uses a sentence like this, then this is the question that you ask.
Okay.
Right, so what the meta model does is it actually divides all kind of statements that a coachee would speak to you
Mm-hmm.
in 3 broad categorizations:
Okay.
generalizations, deletions, distortions, what we spoke about earlier.
Okay.
And then for each of them there are sub classifications.
Okay.
Right, and based on those sub classifications, specific questions are provided to you. So for example, if a client says I'm angry, or my partner was angry, okay, now
Mm-hmm.
this is a part of simple deletion.
Right.
And the first set of question you'll ask the client is about what or about whom.
Right.
Right, so that's how the conversation flows, and then you can kind of carry on more conversations with the client. For those of you who have not heard of meta model, please do a quick research on you can even do it on Google. There are a lot of websites which talk about meta model, and they talk about meta model questions.
Okay.
You should be able to get details over there. If you go to the iChar's website, we have, if I'm not wrong, a couple of detailed articles talking about meta model and the importance of meta model and the different questions that are there on meta model. So you may
Right.
want to refer to that. But it's a very, very structured model, right? So if you're using grow, regrow, t-grow, appreciative inquiry, soft C, any of these framework,
Mm-hmm.
and within this framework, you're struggling with helping clients come up with specific answers, then meta model will be used as a part of those frameworks.
Right.
Right, and that's the beauty of meta model. And then there is a why question model that people use, where you kind of rocket through the questions. So the client says, for example, the client says I will not be able to do it.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, your
Why?
question is why. The client gives you an answer in one sentence, you ask why and why and why. So you're kind of delayering the client's problem. to see where does the client stop. It's generally called the 5 why model.
Okay.
Okay, where you're asking them 5 whys, one after the other, to see where the client reaches.
Okay.
Okay, so this is another model, but personally speaking, I prefer the meta model. I have noticed that it basically covers all possibilities that exist in terms of questioning, and it's also very explorative. Just ensure that you are not confronting a client using that model. You're exploring the information, and that should be good enough.
Fair enough. I think that's quite clear. Nitin, Sumanlata is asking if the coachee is male and the coach is female, sometimes being a lady, some action becomes emotional, gestures, negative wala, though being a coach, again, she has not explained.
So, Malita, I'm not again sure exactly what the question is over there. I would suggest that if you could just ask me what that question is, I would be able to answer that more clearly. But whether it's a lady coach or a male coach or a coach from a third gender, it
Right.
doesn't really matter what the gender is. What really matters is that do you have the skill sets as a coach to be able to ask the right questions? And if questions are not working for you, do you have alternative tools which you can use to help the client get into a talking mode at least as much as required, and then be able to help them come up with information?
Right. Right. Okay. And Neha is asking, what will you suggest if male client is not expressive and feels like his wife should understand without saying anything and without sharing enough information? His wife is extroverted and gives much importance to quality time and feels good communication is important between them to be good parents.
So Neha, in terms of coaching, nothing changes. Your work with the coach, because you're going to work with your husband and the wife separately, and
Right.
then when you work with them jointly, it will be based on the work that you have already done with them. So to that extent, your approach the to both the individuals will not change. It will still remain a coaching session where I'll ask both people exactly what they're expecting and what they need to do, what needs to be done, and then I will bring them to a common session where I would put everything uh, in terms of what their requirements are and help them decide what will be the best course of action. Though what you're asking for, because it becomes a part of relationship coaching is slightly more tricky than classical life coaching, because in classical life coaching you're only working with one client at a time, right? In relationship coaching there is a third element where you work with both the elements individually, and then you also have to work with them jointly, and certain additional models that you need to explain to these people are important. If
Right.
you want to check out, just search for um, love language, sexuality suggestivity. Let me share a link with you, in fact, because that link contains detailed information of what we are talking about.
Nitin, I
uh,
think we have an ultimate guide. No?
Yeah, so there's actually an online workshop that we also have, which is called Ultimate Guide to Relationship,
Yeah.
which is more from a self-help point of view. So if you are someone who's struggling with relationships and you are in this situation where you are more extroverted, your partner is more introverted, or other way around, then that particular course can completely change your life. But if you are a coach or a counselor, then there is a online uh, coaching certification that we have for relationship coaching, which I would recommend for you. But before you go into any of those, because then that becomes paid programs, I'm just sharing with you the link where we have detailed article on what you've asked me. Go through the article and you will realize that that covers a lot of things in detail. And after that, if you have any questions, probably in the next session you can ask me, because then I'll be able to give you an answer based on that once you've already gone through it.
Perfect.
So I'm sharing the link both on Facebook and on.
Thank you.
Meanwhile, Mamta, any other questions? Also,
Mm,
as far as relationship coaching is concerned, if a lot of you are interested, we will probably schedule a different session altogether on relationship coaching.
we can do that, yes. Okay,
I'm also sharing the link in the chat box over here.
right. So while people come up with any other questions that they have, We have one question from the beginning of the session where Shaurya wanted to know the difference between EI coach and life coach.
Okay. So EI coach, a specific type of coaching within the framework of life coaching. So life coaching is like the broad understanding that whenever you're working with clients to be able to help them improve their lives, that's life coaching. Except when you're working with intense negative emotion. So that's then becomes a part of therapy, right? But overall, any coaching work that you will do with a client where they want to improve their life, it becomes life coaching. As a part of that, certain people uh, pick up specific principles from the emotional intelligence model, right? And because I and Mamta were just talking about it today, we were discussing about emotional intelligence, and Mamta is working on an article on emotional intelligence. Mamta, would you quickly be able to summarize what we were discussing today in terms of the components of emotional intelligence?
Right. So they're like, while there are, I mean, different models, right, about on emotional intelligence and so on, there seem to be a few common elements that everybody talks about, which is, so first of all, intelligence refers to the ability to perceive and understand your own emotions, others' emotions, and to be able to use that knowledge to adapt to interactions in a way that you become more effective and achieve the results that you wish to achieve. So there seem to be 5 components to emotional intelligence, one of which is self-awareness, so the ability to recognize and understand your own moods, emotions, and what effect does it have on other people. So it would include things like being able to assess your emotions, self-confidence, and so on. The other is, once you understand what your emotions are, then you should be able to regulate them in order to achieve the results that you're looking for. Then comes internal motivation. So, what is your vision of life? What's the purpose? What are you working towards? What drives you? Right. So all those elements come in: optimism, being in a state of flow, and then we move to empathy. So I think a lot of people understand what empathy is: the ability to understand where other people are coming from, uh, uh, given their backgrounds, contexts, and so on. And then the social skills. So the ability to handle interpersonal relationships, manage relationships, build networks, and the ability to find a common ground with other people and build rapport quickly. So, so when it comes to EI coaching, so I think EI coaches focus more on these elements. Am I right, Nitin? When it comes to helping client create change.
Correct.
So yeah.
And so with AI coaching is like a specific model that you're using in coaching. For example, we use SoftC, right? Now, SoftC technically incorporates emotional intelligence ke components completely. But then there are certain people who would use Grow, certain people who would use Regrow. So similarly with emotional intelligence, both there is the understanding of emotional intelligence where during the coaching process, you're helping coaches explore and understand all the components that Mamta spoke about right now,
Right.
right? And seeing how each of those components can eventually help the coachee achieve the desired outcome.
Right. Perfect. Perfect. Nitin, Shilpa is saying, I wanted to do EI coaching, so it is better if it is covered in life coaching.
Shilpa, I am biased towards the courses that we conduct. I really think that the courses that we conduct incorporate more or less everything there is to do as far as coaching is concerned, right? Because we focus on not just classical life coaching, we focus on emotional intelligence, we focus on additional tools from classical psychology, which can fall within the domain of coaching in terms of helping people restructure their thoughts, condition their ongoing emotions. We have our own processes to help people work with their beliefs, positive intentions, and so on. So if you're looking for a course on coaching, I would still recommend the course that we do. But if you, for any reason, are not able to do the courses that we conduct, uh, not all life coaching courses will teach you
Include.
emotional intelligence coaching.
Yeah.
But all emotional intelligence coaching programs will surely incorporate life coaching. So then probably doing uh, emotional intelligence coaching program would be better than a classical life coaching, because some life coaching programs don't cover emotional intelligence.
Right. Perfect. Perfect. Nitin, Zenat is asking if client is defensive, how to interpret that? Zenat, isn't that an interpretation in itself?
Correct. So one, when the client is defensive and you think the client is defensive, that's an interpretation by itself. Second, you don't really need to interpret that. See, for me, this is the point. The client is coming to you out of their free will for a session and they're paying you for that.
Right.
I really don't see a reason why the coachee or the client has to be defensive unless they completely don't trust the process right now or they don't trust you completely. Then in which case I just need to work towards being able to develop that trust and to be able to help the client feel more comfortable.
Perfect.
My interpreting the client wouldn't help me, right? And in fact, my what we spoke about earlier, engaged listening and effective communication will only help me develop that rapport, that trust that the client needs to be able to talk to me and not remain defensive.
Absolutely.
I hope that answers your question.
Yes. Shilpa is also asking, ICF is important, question mark, for EI?
No, ICF is just a coaching institute that it's basically a coaching association. There are multiple coaching associations worldwide. None of those coaching associations are actually necessary.
Yeah.
Okay. Uh, so you have to understand this. Primarily, when you do a coaching certification program, the coaching certification program is about you developing skills to become a coach. The certification is basically just a piece of paper. There is no legal there is no legal standing of that certification, including the certifications that we issue. So we are no different in that sense, right? The only reason why I am in favor of the courses that we conduct is because I know that the course that we are covering is extremely comprehensive and the competencies that we help you develop uh, are kind of all-rounded. Where ICF certification or any other association certification come in is here. There are places where, let's say, you want to get a assignment with a particular company, and that company has a requirement that we only give assignments to an ICF certified coach. Then that ICF certification will be handy, right? But it's not because it shows how competent you are. I've come across certain ICF certified coaches, and the less I talk about them, the better it is.
Right.
Okay, it's sad, but that's true. Again, that's not to say that ICF certification is bad. It's just that these are individual practitioners. You can't really completely regulate what individual practitioners would do in their practice.
Right.
Certification eventually is just a certification.
Correct.
Right? But yes, it does tell you the kind of programs you've gone through. So my suggestion, please focus more on the competencies you develop in the program. And then eventually, if you feel that a particular association helps you get more work, go ahead and get certified with that association. Right? But don't make coaching associations as a ballpark for you to decide whether you want to do a certification program or not, or you want to attend a particular program or not.
Right. Right.
And also, as I said, ICF is only one. There are multiple international associations. ICF is the more popular one in India, but worldwide there is the Association of Coaches, there is the International Coaching Register, there is European EMCC. I don't remember the full form right now, which is
Indian
there.
coaching something body. Yeah.
Right. So there are like a lot of international coaching associations and federations. You may want to become a member of any of them. Check whether you are in sync with them or not. So, for example, to give you our example, the reason why we went for an ICR registration rather than ICF registration was because with ICF we were told we would have to move, we would have to change our curriculum, and we would have to remove hypnosis from the curriculum, right? Hypnosis is what gives edge to our program. I'm not going to undervalue my program and make my program less effective because I want an ICF certification.
Right.
Right? So I went for ICR because of that reason. Also, ICF has an element where they focus a lot on individual intuition of clients, of coaches. I personally believe that the coach has to be as objective as possible. Intuition, you need to help the client tap into their intuition.
Correct.
As a coach, you don't need to be able to tap into your intuition when working with the client. You need to tap into your intuition when you're working with yourself.
Right.
You need to tap into your intuition when you're working with a coach, when you're working with your coachee, because you don't have the skill sets to objectively work with the coachee. And sadly, because a lot of classical coaching programs don't train you for those skills. For example, I have, with hypnosis and NLP, I know that we can help you develop the competencies to help the client tap into their intuitions. Classical coaching programs would not be able to do that. So it becomes a requirement for a classical coach to be able to tap into their intuition. Our experience, the less you depend on your intuition and the more you depend on your processes and your objective feedback, the more effective and the faster you get the results.
Absolutely. Absolutely. I agree. Perfect. Ketki, Nitin, can you share the relationship course details on Zoom?
Okay, so I'm putting it in the chat.
And okay, so no more questions on Facebook. Maybe we can go off Facebook.
Actually, we have like really short overtime. We are at 8:50 right now.
Yes, we have.
Okay, so if any of you have any other questions that we have not answered today, please feel free to ask us those questions. I would surely begin the next session with those questions that you've asked earlier. Some of you are also in the WhatsApp group. I will share the recording of this in the WhatsApp group any which ways. Go through the recording again. If you have any questions, feel free to ask us questions in the WhatsApp group also. I would be more than happy to answer those questions. Right?
Perfect.
And in the end, because I said about the Visitor Mental Practitioner Challenge, my request to all of you, if ever there is a situation where you feel you're not in charge of what's happening in your life, you're feeling emotionally vulnerable, you're feeling that a particular thought or an emotion has been bothering you for more than a couple of days continuously, please visit a mental health practitioner. Don't wait before it's too late, right? And I promise and I commit that I would visit a mental health practitioner whenever I go through any of those experiences. I hope each of you can make that commitment also.
Perfect.
Right? I'm going to shut off the Facebook live now, live
Okay.
right now.
Okay.
Okay,
How
so
do I
I
get in
just before that, Vikram has asked a question: how do I get into the
WhatsApp group?
WhatsApp group? So I'll just share the link to the WhatsApp group. Just give me a second.
Please. You're welcome, Sumanlata. Okay.
And thank you everyone for being on the live, both via Zoom and via Facebook. Um, it's been a pleasure. You have no idea how much help these sessions has provided to us in terms of structuring the information that we provide to people. And all of this has happened only because you have been a wonderful audience.